After placing his hand on Anna's head, Suzuki activates his skill. Within moments, her eyes go dark as she falls under his control. Something is clearly wrong. Once Catgirl realizes that Suzuki has done something to Annette, she grabs by the jacket and demands to know what happened to her. Koto snickers and tells her that there's nothing she can do now that Suzuki's skill has been activated, as it turns anyone he pets into his mindless slave. Enraged, Catgirl threatens to beat Koto up until he gets Suzuki to turn Annette back to normal. But before she can act, Suzuki places his hand on her head and uses his ability to turn her into an obedient slave as well. Things have gotten out of hand, so Aisha finally confronts Suzuki for misusing his ability, which she taught him to use only for good. However, Suzuki couldn't care less about Aisha's disapproval, he holds all the power. Since Aisha and the townspeople are so insistent on opposing him, he decides to destroy the town completely to set an example and rebuild it as a place where no one will dare to stand up to him again. Before he leaves, he tells Aisha he will take over her church and use it as his castle. Meanwhile, the attack dogs proceed to destroy the town under Suzuki's orders, including Catgirl, who is currently attacking the suit of armor Sensei was stuffed into earlier. Sensei is not alarmed by Catgirl's behavior, in fact, he finds it amusing that Annette was right about him needing armor in emergencies like this. Eventually, Catgirl's punches deal enough damage to shatter the armor's plating, but in the process, the helmet goes flying into her face, knocking her out instantly. Now free from the armor, Sensei sees that Catgirl is unconscious on the ground and does the only thing he can think to do, he stuffs her in a barrel to prevent her from hurting anyone. After this, Aisha crashes into the building beside him, and for once, she is relieved to see Sensei's face. However, she remains firm in her earlier statements, viewing Suzuki as a prime example of what other worlders can become. Not only did Suzuki use his gift for selfish desires, but his greed has also made him a danger to society. The power from his gift must have gone straight to his head, as he wasn't like this when he first arrived in this world. Initially, he was a shy and weak-willed man, but now he has turned into a monster. Hearing Aisha describe Suzuki's descent into evil inspires Sensei. He asks Aisha where Suzuki is, and she informs him that he should be in the church. Sensei insists on going to see Suzuki, believing his story will make an interesting topic for a novel. Aisha warns him that it's crazy to confront a hero without a gift, but Sensei is determined. Aisha relents and agrees to accompany him for safety. As they arrive at the church doors, Sensei is excited, while Aisha cannot understand how he remains so calm, given what Suzuki's gift is capable of. If Sensei opens the door without a plan, she warns, he will be torn apart by Suzuki's beasts. Just then, Sensei pulls a vial of poison from his sleeve. Aisha is impressed, thinking he plans to use it against the beasts, but to her shock, he drinks the entire vial in one gulp. Since they can't use the poison anymore, Aisha gets down on all fours and tells Sensei they must use the back door. However, Sensei ignores her and walks straight through the front door. He greets Suzuki and expresses interest in writing a novel about his story. Suzuki thinks Sensei is a fan wishing to document his heroic deeds, but Sensei clarifies that he wants to write about a loser who gained power he didn't deserve and ultimately became a scumbag. Insulted, Suzuki orders his dogs to rip Sensei to shreds. Still standing there, Aisha takes it upon herself to defend him, casting a spell that fires lasers at the dogs' heads. Eventually, she is overwhelmed, and Suzuki orders his remaining beasts to shoot fireballs at Sensei. It looks like Sensei is in real danger, but at the last moment, the fireballs are deflected by a floating helmet. It turns out Mello was making the helmet float, and the armor can deflect low-level spells. Koto begins to freak out, realizing that Sensei is blessed with plot armor. However, Suzuki tells him to calm down, as he still has one more trick up his sleeve. He orders his great wolf to attack Sensei. As the wolf bites into him, it suddenly begins to decay and falls to the ground. Aisha can't believe that Sensei drinking the poison actually saved them. By now, Koto is convinced that Suzuki cannot defeat Sensei, so he takes off running. Suzuki admits that Sensei is more formidable than he initially thought, but he still has one final card to play. He orders Anna to come out and kill them. Under mind control, Anna charges at Aisha with a dagger, nearly stabbing her. Aisha is forced to back away, thinking it's best to retreat for now. However, Sensei believes Anna is strong enough to resist the mind control on her own. Suzuki calls him a fool, insisting that his mind control is impossible to dispel once activated, meaning Anna will be his slave for life. Yet Sensei walks right up to her with the knife and tells Anna that she doesn't have to listen to Suzuki. It seems he's getting through to her, as Anna starts holding herself back from stabbing Sensei. Suzuki, displeased, uses all his power to force her to stab him. But through sheer will and a flashback, Anna overcomes the brainwashing by stabbing herself in the leg. The pain snaps her out of it, and she falls into Sensei's arms. Now that Anna is back to her usual self, Sensei asks Aisha to treat her leg wound. Aisha begins to realize that she may have misjudged Sensei as a person. Meanwhile, Suzuki, realizing his ability isn't all-powerful, understands he will be held accountable for all his war crimes. Unable to bear the thought of punishment at the hands of those he oppressed, he looks for a knife to end his life. But at the last second, Sensei stops him, not out of concern for Suzuki's life, but because he hasn't finished writing his story yet. He wants Suzuki to tell him all about his life. With nothing left to lose, Suzuki begins recounting his life back on Earth. He was a high school student bullied relentlessly by bigger kids, timid and weak, unable to stand up for himself. He even contemplated suicide but was too cowardly to follow through. One day, a drunk old man bumped into him and yelled as if it were Suzuki's fault. Though angry, he still lacked the will to defend himself. Overall, he was a miserable person, making him a prime target for trouble. Before he knew it, he was transported to this world and greeted by Aisha as a hero chosen to defeat the Demon Lord. Left to level up on his own, he fought wolves and ultimately made them his faithful servants. With strong allies, he believed things were finally improving, but he soon realized that despite his newfound power, people still treated him like an outcast, just as they had on Earth. The thought of being bullied again drove him to his breaking point. Hearing Sensei's story, he feels pity for Suzuki. Sensei is pleased with the story, as it allows him to finish his novel about a pitiful man who could never become a hero or villain due to his own weakness and outcast in any world. He decides to title the novel Isekai Shikaku. As he names it, pages from the novel begin to float around Suzuki. Sensei thanks Suzuki for his story, as it allowed him to write something he is satisfied with, but he still cannot call it a masterpiece. He rips a page from the novel apart, and a magic circle appears beneath Suzuki. Both Aisha and Annette recognize it as the summoning circle used to bring heroes to this world, but this one acts in reverse. In a flash of light, Suzuki is unsummoned and sent back to Earth. With Suzuki gone, the monsters under his control stop being aggressive and begin leaving the town. Catgirl finally frees herself from the barrel but can't remember why she was in there to begin with. After things return to normal, Aisha thinks Sensei deserves a reward for saving the town from Suzuki. At his request, she has a custom coffin made for him. Annette thanks Aisha for all her help, but before she leaves, Aisha says there is something important she would like to discuss with Annette. She tells her that it is likely Sensei is an incredibly important hero to this world, meaning traveling with him will be incredibly dangerous. However, after witnessing Annette's willpower, Aisha believes she can handle any challenges that arise. She asks Annette to support Sensei to the best of her ability. With that, the group is ready to continue their journey. Catgirl and Annette grab the ropes to pull Sensei's coffin, but before they go, Aisha has a question for Sensei. While it's true that Suzuki turned out to be a rotten hero, Aisha wonders if he only became that way because he was summoned. Now that he has been sent back to Earth, she fears he may be doomed to continue his miserable life. Sensei sees it differently, believing that while Suzuki's story as a hero of this world is over, his story on Earth is still in progress, and it is up to him to change things for the better.
履歴書ははい。もう中退しちゃったんだね。でもいいかな？大丈夫？ね。いえ。それじゃあ明日からよろしくね。
After Sensei and the others had left, Aisha went to the headquarters of the church to report on recent events. Upon her arrival, she noticed her colleague Wolf sitting and drinking his sorrows away. She was appalled that he would be drinking so early in the day, but he insisted he needed to because his job was far more stressful than hers. While Aisha dealt with other people, Wolf was forced to deal with dwarves, who, he claimed, smelled absolutely terrible. Before he could continue insulting the dwarves, Elin entered and told Wolf that it wasn't right for him to say such racist things at work, especially since he was a bishop. Wolf half-heartedly apologized but then insulted Elin for being a goblin bishop, noting that most bishops were elves. Elin didn't take much offense and pointed out that Wolf was acting worse than the dwarves he claimed to hate. This set Wolf off, and he dared Elin to try dealing with the dwarves all day to see if he still wasn't racist afterward. Suddenly, they were interrupted when Cardinal Miller arrived and told them to stop bickering and take their seats so they could begin the meeting. Once the meeting started, Miller apologized for summoning everyone on such short notice and asked for reports from each region. However, he noted that someone was missing. Just then, another bishop stumbled into the room, and none of them recognized her. Miller introduced her as the new bishop of the Western Temple, taking over after Annette left her job. After everyone was seated, Miller asked the bishops to begin their reports, starting with Era. She introduced herself as Annette's replacement and reported that nothing noteworthy had happened in her region. The cardinal mentioned he had heard that Princess Charlotte recently inherited the throne, which seemed noteworthy. Era apologized for forgetting to mention it. As she nervously awaited her fate, the goblin Bishop Elton interrupted with his report, stating that his region had experienced nothing but peace lately, so he didn't have much to report. Wolf went next, giving his report on his territory, which is located in the middle of nowhere but is doing all right. There are occasional conflicts with dwarves, but it's normal and not a cause for concern. Next was Aisha, who had terrible news. Another worlder had gone on a rampage in her region, destroying half of the town of Ville. She was currently working to restore the town to normal. Miller had called the meeting primarily because of the other worlders. He informed them that the recently defeated Dark Lord had been taken down by a group of other worlders, and in light of this, the Pope had decided to seal the magic circles connecting their world to others and put Truck on indefinite paid leave. Elton was glad the battle with the Dark Lord was over, but a looming threat remained. The 7 other worlders who defeated the Dark Lord had claimed the land once ruled by him as their own, and the Pope received a declaration from them stating they would transform Zeeburg into a perfect utopia. This clearly sounded like a declaration of war, and the Pope was greatly stressed by their threat. The other worlders were meant to be angels sent from above to save this world, and he truly cared for them. Now, however, they had turned against him, and the Church had to prepare for the impending danger. They also needed to worry about other worlders causing chaos in each region and the daughter of the Dark Lord, who had disappeared from his castle. None of them ever thought the day would come when other worlders would become enemies of the Church. If they worked together, the other worlders would pose a far greater threat than the Dark Lord ever had. Era was worried about how they would fight such strong opponents, but Aisha had an idea. She informed the others that there was a particular other worlder who had used his gift to send another other worlder back to his own world. The others were shocked to hear this, but if Aisha's hypothesis was correct, they could send the other worlders back to their own worlds with Sensei's gift. Just then, the Pope arrived, delighting everyone with his presence. He was eager to hear such good news and asked Aisha to fill him in on the details of this man. Meanwhile, within the Dark Lord's territory, 2 of the 7 other worlders who had taken down the Dark Lord remained in the castle, while the other 5 set out to claim various regions for their new empire. The 2 left behind were eager to see what would happen next in this world. Back with Sensei and the others, they finally reached their destination. Catgirl was excited to sleep in a bed again, but suddenly she received a notification from her system. Due to all her coughing and pulling, her level had risen to 17. Although leveling up was nice, she didn't seem pleased with how it happened. Anna suggested they start looking for an inn to spend the night at. Out of nowhere, a voice told them there was a good inn down the road. Anna looked up and spotted a little boy sitting on a signpost. He offered to give her information to help navigate the town since she was new. The boy mentioned a hero dispatch service in the town, where other worlders accompany parties lacking confidence on missions, ensuring their safety and making the mission run smoothly. He claimed he came up with the idea himself, but as soon as he mentioned other worlders, Catgirl flashed back to what Zero and Suzuki had done and wanted nothing to do with it. The boy didn't understand why she disliked other worlders, as they were the ones who saved this world. Nevertheless, he offered to introduce them to another worlder right away for a small fee. He asked for 40,000 Geno for the introduction, but Catgirl refused, saying they didn't want to waste that much money. However, Anna was more than happy to spend that amount if it meant getting a strong hero to keep Sensei safe. The boy thought she was talking about guarding the coffin, so he began a speech about how the dead guy would appreciate having his body guarded. Just then, Sensei popped out of the coffin and told the boy he wasn't dead yet, but he wished he were. The boy was terrified, but Catgirl reassured him that despite how he looked, Sensei was also a hero. The boy, however, didn't believe her. He quickly snatched the money from Anna and told them he would bring the hero to their inn later that night. Although Catgirl was initially against the idea, she admitted it would be nice to have a strong hero join their party since it meant she wouldn't have to carry the coffin anymore. Yet Anna actually enjoyed pulling it. Later that night, they waited at the inn for Nura to arrive, as he had promised. Sensei warned Anna that the boy wasn't going to come anytime soon. To put it simply, she had been scammed. Hearing this, the innkeeper asked Anna if she was waiting for a kid named Nir. Upon confirming this, he informed them that Nir was notorious for being a young scam artist and had never even met a hero before, so there was no way he could introduce Anna to one. Anna was devastated at having lost 40,000 Geno. Catgirl tried to calm her down while Sensei wanted to know more about Nir. The innkeeper explained that Nir was an orphan who had shown up in town one day and had since made a living by scamming unsuspecting travelers. While he was a nuisance, the innkeeper sometimes felt sorry for him, as he had no parental figures to correct his behavior. Meanwhile, Nir was sitting under a bridge, staring at an old sword. Moments later, he was snatched up by some unknown kidnappers and taken to an abandoned shed, where they examined all the money he had swindled. Nir asked them what they planned to do with him, and the three men had evil intentions in their eyes. Mir tried to bluff his way out of the situation, claiming his hero friend would avenge him if they harmed him. However, the men weren't worried, knowing that Nir had never met a hero. As a matter of fact, they claimed to be heroes themselves. One of them had a gift that allowed him to summon a powerful crossbow, and since Nir had carelessly used the name of heroes to scam people, the other planned to punish him with an arrow to the head. Nir couldn't believe that the heroes he looked up to were actually scumbags, but he accepted his fate and awaited his death. At the last second, Sensei showed up and pushed the bowman's hand, redirecting the arrow into the knee of the metal man. Sensei told them they had no right to call themselves heroes when they acted like this. His words were promptly ignored as the one with glowing eyes used his skill to analyze Sensei. To his shock, he discovered that Sensei was also an otherworlder, putting them all on edge since they didn't know what kind of power Sensei might have. Upon closer inspection, the appraiser realized that Sensei only had 1 point of HP left and was currently poisoned, which calmed the bowman, who thought he could easily defeat Sensei. However, when Sensei heard the bowman say he was going to end him, his interest piqued, and he began walking straight toward them. The appraiser started to freak out as Sensei's health stats began increasing at a rapid rate. Sensei then dared the bowman to shoot him right in the heart. The bowman thought this was a trap and ran away with his friends. As they left, Sensei was disappointed, as he had hoped they would finish him off. Mir spoke up, asking Sensei if he was a hero, but Sensei denied being someone so noble, saying he was just a man trying to survive in a cruel world. Mir, still a child, thought he should try to preserve his innocence a little longer before becoming as rotten as those other worlders. As Sensei began to leave, Mir felt inspired by his speech, but his inspiration quickly turned to panic when he realized that Sensei had forgotten to untie him, leaving him stuck there all night. The next morning, Sensei and the others prepared to leave town and continue their journey. Catgirl noticed that Sensei seemed sleepy and asked if he had managed to get a good night's sleep. Anna recalled that Sensei had snuck off somewhere the previous night without telling them where he was going, prompting her to ask if he had spent the night with a woman. Sensei only replied that he had an eventful night, causing Anna to cry over the possibility that another woman had gotten to Sensei before her. They were interrupted by Mir, who urged them to hurry so they could start going. As soon as Catgirl recognized him, she yelled for him to give them back their money for lying to them. Nur maintained that he had never lied, insisting that he had indeed brought a hero to join their party and that hero was him, even if he wasn't very strong. They continued their journey, but shortly after, all of them were thrown in jail. Catgirl was taken somewhere else, and Aisha assumed she must be the reason they were locked up, speculating that she might have stolen from the royal family. Anna didn't believe it, knowing Catgirl wasn't the type to steal. Despite their predicament, Sensei was more concerned with finding out what kind of execution methods this world used. Annette refused to tell him, not wanting to give him any ideas, but Sensei already had various execution images in his head. Nur thought they should at least try to escape by themselves, even without Catgirl for now, but Anna was unsure how they would manage that. Before she realized it, Nur had already picked the lock on the cell, earning them their freedom. While it wasn't a skill an honorable warrior would possess, it was hard to argue with results. However, Sensei was a little upset that Nur had freed them, as it meant they wouldn't be executed. Moments later, the guards noticed their escape attempt and locked them up again. Sensei was pleased since it meant they might still face execution. They were brought before the king of the kingdom of Grunt, who stated they had committed a very severe crime against the kingdom and would be executed. Sensei was happy to hear this, but Annette pleaded for reconsideration, arguing they had only just arrived and hadn't committed any crimes. The king countered that they had committed the worst crime of all, kidnapping the princess, Matilda. Just then, Catgirl walked in, shocking everyone as she revealed herself to be Princess Matilda. She told her father that her friends hadn't kidnapped her, she had gone on a journey to improve her combat abilities and had met them along the way. Even though the king now knew Sensei and the others were innocent, he refused to release them. Instead, he decided to use the lives of Matilda's friends as leverage to ensure her good behavior. He insisted that he would only let them live if Matilda agreed to never act foolishly again. Reluctantly, Matilda agreed, swearing to behave like a proper princess, even though it meant turning her back on her friendship with them. Because she complied, they were allowed to go free. That night, the three of them gathered at a bar. Mir was happy they weren't executed after all, and he barely knew Matilda, so he wasn't upset about her being forced to leave the party. Meanwhile, Sensei was really upset, mostly because he had wanted to be executed. Mir found it surprising that Catgirl turned out to be a princess, while Annette was mortified, realizing that being rude to royalty could be punishable by death. She had been rude to Catgirl countless times and felt guilty for calling her Catgirl without asking her name. While Anna agonized over her past actions, the waitress overheard her mention Matilda's name and introduced herself as Fawn, saying she used to work as Matilda's maid. Mir explained that they had traveled with Matilda until yesterday when the king dragged her back to the castle and forbade her from going on any more adventures. Fawn's expression suggested there was more to the story, so Sensei asked her to tell him what happened between Matilda and her father. Anna thought it might be rude to pry into Matilda's personal life, but Sensei didn't care. To him, Matilda would always be the same old Catgirl. Meanwhile, Matilda was in the castle, recalling how funny it was when Annette and Mir realized she was a princess. Sensei had still treated her the same way. She wondered what the others were up to and, looking out the window, noticed a figure standing on a nearby building. Moments later, that figure caused mass destruction in the castle. After the chaos, the king and his guards were alerted to the presence of an intruder. By the time they arrived, the intruder had already taken a seat on the throne and expressed his disappointment with the kingdom of Grunt, mentioning he hadn't had the chance to taste a demi-human girl yet. The king demanded the intruder identify himself, and he announced that his name was Cabera, one of the 7 other worlders who defeated the Dark Lord, also known as the Fallen Angel of Gluttony. The king asked Cabera what he was doing there, and it became clear that Cabera intended to consume the entire nation. While the soldiers of the kingdom were ready to risk their lives to protect it, Cabera summoned his gluttonous mouth and chomped down on them, disgusted by the taste of the demi-humans. Cabera stated he only wanted to eat the soft flesh of a demi-human girl, and the king, unwilling to allow that, decided to confront Cabera himself. Amused, Cabera pulled out his mouth and launched spit bullets at the king. The king blocked the attack with rubble and closed the distance, attacking Cabera with a lightning fist. Initially, it seemed effective, but Cabera pretended to be in pain, revealing that his body was tough from eating a bunch of golems. Realizing his regular punches wouldn't work, the king decided to go all out and use his most powerful move. Cabera was intrigued and charged forward as well. However, before they could clash, Matilda interrupted the fight. Upon seeing her, Cabera was eager to taste her flesh. Matilda recognized him as the intruder from the roof and tore her dress, offering to help the king fight. However, the king refused her help, reminding her that she couldn't replace her brother. Meanwhile, Sensei and the others were hearing about Matilda's brother from Fawn. Her brother, Leon, was set to inherit the throne, and the future of the kingdom looked bright with him and kind-hearted Matilda beside him. Tragedy struck when Leon and Matilda's mother, Lima, were caught in a cave-in and lost their lives. The king was devastated by the loss of his wife and son, and so was Matilda. She took on her brother's responsibilities to ease her father's pain, but this created a rift between them. In the present, the king tried to convince Matilda to run away instead of fighting, but she insisted on proving herself as a capable fighter. She leaped into the air to attack Cabera, but he summoned his mouth to swallow her whole. At the last moment, the king pushed her out of the way, losing an arm in the process. Cabera was disappointed that he couldn't see the king's ultimate technique, as he had eaten his arm. Matilda, enraged, charged at Cabera again, but the king's advisor knocked her out and ran away with her to keep her safe. Cabera was disappointed that his meal had escaped, but he was confident he would catch up to her eventually, so he turned his attention to finishing off the king. After hearing Matilda's story from Fawn, Sensei thanked her for sharing, as it was quite inspiring. Suddenly, the king's advisor came flying out of the sky and landed in front of them. Fawn recognized him, and he explained that he had to make a hasty escape from the castle because it had been taken over by an evil otherworlder. Just then, an explosion erupted from the castle, and Cabera addressed the crowd, declaring himself the new king of Grunt. He stated that he desired to taste all varieties of demi-humans, specifically women and children, allowing the men to go about their business as usual. Understandably, the people were enraged by Cabera's declaration. One man threatened to beat him up, but Cabera swallowed him whole, telling the crowd that if they were unhappy with him eating only women and children, he could eat the men too, so everyone could be together in his stomach. The people realized how dangerous Cabera was and attempted to flee the capital, but it was futile as Cabera had stationed monsters at the gates, ensuring no one could leave until he had his fill of demi-human meat. Mir was shocked by how dangerous Cabera was, while Sensei was intrigued, believing he had found his next story. Matilda, recently confined by her father, was now the princess of a falling nation, making her story one of tragedy. Sensei wanted to see how she would overcome this challenge. Eventually, Matilda woke up confused about why she was in Fawn's house. Upon seeing the chaos in the streets, she remembered the Cabera situation and rushed out the front door, surprised to find Sensei and the others there. Briard informed Matilda that Cabera had taken over the kingdom and was trying to eat the citizens. Matilda angrily marched off to confront him, but Briard held her back, warning that it was unwise to face Cabera, as even the king stood no chance against his power. Matilda insisted that the king had been holding his ground against Cabera and that he was defeated only because she had put herself in danger, forcing him to protect her. She felt responsible for the people of the nation since Leon was no longer around. Before she could leave, Annette mentioned the tragedy that resulted in the deaths of 2 royals. Though she had heard of the accident, she never knew it involved Matilda's brother and mother. The citizens of Grunt mourned their loss greatly, showing how beloved the royal family was. If the people lost Matilda now, they would lose all hope. As the princess of Grunt, Matilda couldn't afford to put herself in danger so casually. Therefore, Sensei and the others decided to confront Cabera in her place. Matilda wasn't there to see it last time, but Sensei had a power that could defeat otherworlders, so everything would be alright. Sensei seemed on board with the idea of confronting Cabera, but as they arrived at the castle doors, they were stopped by 2 monsters. Sensei declared he had come because he wanted to be eaten by Cabera. After all the time he spent thinking about various execution methods, he realized that being eaten might be an interesting way to meet his end, so he wanted the monsters to inform Cabera of his arrival. Confused, the monsters locked the 3 of them up in a cell. Meanwhile, Annette was crying, believing they were really going to be eaten. While Sensei was interested in the possibility of being eaten, he hadn't actually come just to die, he had a plan in mind for their escape. He reminded Mir that these were the same castle prison cells he had helped them escape from that morning, so he could pick the lock again.